listener production.
Hello, Antoinette Lattouf here with the afternoon episode of The Briefing. So, imagine this. You're driving up the highway and a car pulls up alongside you in the next lane and you turn your head and you realise no one is actually behind the wheel. The car is driverless. Well, that's the future if you ask the experts, and Elon Musk. So we've actually been hearing about it for years, but when will it actually become a reality?
Team Tum from Germany on the inside, trying to make the move on the Polymove team, and then chaos.
Well, that audio you just heard was from a race over the weekend featuring driverless cars in Abu Dhabi. And as you can hear, it actually ended in chaos, including one of the driverless cars just randomly driving into a wall. So although the concept of driverless cars has been around for 100 years, Elon Musk's Tesla announced last month it was launching an autonomous taxi later this year. But a quick note, he has been making these promises since 2015, and Chinese manufacturers are also in the race to get self-driving cars on the road. So how do these cars work? How safe are they? And how long will it be before we're all expected to share the road with autonomous vehicles? James Ward is head of content at drive.com.au. James, thanks for joining us on The Briefing. Firstly, if you can, in layman's terms, just describe how the technology works and how much autonomous technology is already available in vehicles.
Yeah, no, look, it's a really good question because there are multiple levels of autonomy. And I guess for most people, the most basic way to think of it is cruise control, the way that the car will, when you set it to cruise control, and even in a modern car with an adaptive cruise control system, it will maintain a speed, it will maintain a gap between the car in front, so it'll speed up and slow down automatically. The car is essentially driving itself. You don't need to be giving it any input through the pedals, it will figure it out. Then you've got some slightly more advanced cruise controls that allow the car to maintain a lane. And you can hear it, it's called lane keeping aid or lane keeping assistant, where again, cameras and radars within the car will see the white lines on the road and they will balance the car in the middle of the lane. Now, usually you can allow the car to drive for maybe 90 seconds at a maximum thing before the car will warn you that you do need to hang on to the wheel. Now, these are driver assistance tools. Full autonomy is a step above that, where we basically trust the car to do all of the driving. And that means not just maintaining a speed and maintaining a lane, but being able to change lanes, being able to read street signs, to stop, to go. So there's an awful lot of processing power by the car's computer going on at that time.
It seems that there's quite a big gulf, though, from my car, which if I was to press a button can reverse itself, reverse park itself, which I have never used, to actually having cars cruising around with no drivers. Talk me through what it's going to take and how far off we're from reverse parking, a car reverse parking itself, to fully autonomous vehicles.
We are seeing trials in some cities, in some parts of the world, where they run the Waymo taxis, for example, in the US. So these are Jaguar cars that are covered in cameras and sensors, and you will hail one and it'll arrive with no driver and you get in and drive around. But compared to, as you say, the self-parking system, the car is working in a very, very small system of where it needs to work out. So you're telling it that you're ready to park. It's moving at a very slow speed. It knows what's behind it. So it knows there's a space where it can fit, and it knows roughly the maneuver it needs to make to do a parallel park. So it is a bit of trained behavior, if you will, with the car, but it's only working in that little environment. And as you know, if you use that system, if you tap the pedal or touch the wheel, you override it immediately.
Yes.
Moving up to a full driverless system. And the reason they're trialing it in certain cities is that they've really, really mapped out those cities pretty hard. But if you're driving around any Australian roads in a major city of Melbourne or Sydney, we have roadworks, we have missing line markings, we have changing line markings, you've got other drivers, you've got other cars, you've got so many other factors that the car needs to take into account that it moves from being able to move itself in a controlled ecosystem of a parallel park to a kind of ever-changing environment where it needs to adapt on the fly. And quite frankly, I think certainly in Australia, we're years away from allowing this to happen, because you kind of can't let Herbie loose and just hope that he makes it, because of every other part of that ecosystem, which is other drivers, other cars. In Melbourne, we have trams. There's all sorts of things you need to consider. the cars are just doing what they're told. So they are incredibly susceptible to external influence as well, is the other thing.
Am I missing something? Because why do we need autonomous cars? I mean, I'm not a great driver, and anybody who's seen me reverse park would probably suggest I use the button. It could do a better job than me. But I'm still trying to understand why we need it.
Yeah, and look, I think this is more of a because we can rather than because we should technology.
Right.
This is science fiction to reality, where we sit there and we see those sort of 1950s and 60s illustrations. You see modern Hollywood looking at the near future, and the idea of an autonomous transport system where you can simply get in to a pod as it only ever really needs to be. It can be a comfortable kind of lounge room with sort of facing seats, and just tell it where you want to go, and it does all the hard work for you because we as humans have overcome the mere task of driving. The reality is this is not, we aren't building a utopian society from scratch. We're not starting and doing science fiction world building here. We're dealing with a legacy system and legacy road users and existing roads and existing rules. So to supplant modern technology into that, there's so many steps that it needs to go. And it's amazing technology. Let's be really clear. What those cars can do and are capable of is incredibly impressive. But calling it autopilot so that Joe and Jill Average can go and buy a car and think, I can press autopilot and I don't need to do anything, is a glaring oversight, because people who are buying these cars, they're not reading all the news, they're not reading the manual, they're hearing the word autopilot and thinking that car can drive itself. The way that Tesla is doing live testing in society and allowing people to drive around and record themselves driving basically autonomously, God, that's risky. And look, maybe I'm a bit risk averse. Maybe I'm looking at it from this perspective. But in Australia, I don't think we are. I don't think we're equipped ethically. I don't think we're equipped with our infrastructure. I certainly don't think we're equipped legally to handle this kind of step.
I'm going to get to Elon Musk and some of the promises he's made in just a moment, and also China's race in this. But another race that happened over the weekend, which didn't end too well, was in Abu Dhabi. The autonomous race, which ended in chaos. Like, what did we learn? I mean, what do you take away from something like that Abu Dhabi race?
I think what you've summed up there, what did we learn? We're not ready is the summary. And we were talking about this at the Drive office yesterday, because in theory, you can get a computer game that is that same track, and you could be playing on a computer game and you could be racing against artificial intelligence competitors who race around that track. So technically, the computers know how to drive around a racetrack. But when you put it into the real life scenario, you're dealing with physics, you're dealing with light, you're dealing with all sorts of things that can throw the computers out. And I think, look, some of it was pretty funny to watch. And I guess it's sort of funny and embarrassing at the same time. The fact that the autonomous cars are slower than a real driver's car, there's one thing. And just some of the things, like there's one which just turned and went into a wall. And it shows this is not a perfect science yet.
You say the Abu Dhabi race shows that we are not ready. It seems Elon Musk has been for years saying that we are. He said that we'd have autonomous robo-taxis in 2018, but he made that comment in 2015, and then in 2019, he said that we'd have robo-taxis the following year, which would have been 2020. It hasn't eventuated.
Yeah, he's made a date for the 8th of the 8th this year. And you're right, it hasn't eventuated because we're not there. And all of these things in a controlled environment, and we see this with a lot of modern cars coming through from some of the developing countries. They're moving very, very quickly. They've got some impressive technology coming, but they are testing and developing these cars in arguably a perfect system. So we've seen some of the testing centers in China from some of these brands. They're brand new. You've got these perfect billiard table smooth surfaces and perfect line markings, and they're testing their autonomous systems, their driver assistance, so your lane keep and your bits and pieces there. You bring those cars to Australia because they're working perfectly in their test environment, where we don't have a perfect system. We don't have clear line marking and perfect roads, and the systems fall apart. So this idea that you can tune out and not be involved in the driving task is pretty dangerous, to be honest, and we're not there yet.
Well, another thing that upsets Musk and gets in the way is China's race in this, because not only are they manufacturing electronic vehicles that are much cheaper. They also have plans to launch a new mass market brand, Mona, that'll have self-driving features, and that car's going to be priced around $20,000. Musk was in China over the weekend. How concerned do you think Musk is about China beating him, and how much do you think that may in fact speed up the rollout, for better or worse, of autonomous vehicles?
The speed at which the Chinese brands and the technology behind them are working to move forward in this space, both in the vehicles themselves, the battery technology, and in the driver assistance and autonomy technology. It is an incredibly fast-moving market. And I think every single auto manufacturer around the world is watching and looking and trying to see, well, if we don't act or we don't somehow connect, we're going to be left behind, because that market is moving incredibly fast. And China wants to be the world's leader in electric cars. They're kind of already there. And if they keep moving at the pace they have been for the past few years, they're going to just overtake Europe or the US or anywhere else very, very quickly.
What's your prediction? When do you think we're likely to see it on Australian roads?
Look, I think we may get cruise control lanes. So the Hume Highway on major transit corridors between Melbourne and Sydney, where cars will, especially approved vehicles, will go into an approved lane and they can be in a super cruise kind of environment. But I think on suburban streets, to say, Herbie, take me to the shops, look, honestly, I think we're at least 10 years away from the first. You may get it in some new development cities where they go and actually build the line markings and all the bits and pieces for it. But in terms of, hey, car, take me to Bendigo, I honestly don't think we'll see it in our lifetime.
James, thanks for your time. I don't know, maybe I'm risk averse too, because I'm certainly in no hurry for driverless cars. That was James Ward, Head of Content at drive.com.au. Before you go, though, we'd love it if you could share this app with someone you think might enjoy it too. And if you want to keep up with our other content, you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast, and we're on TikTok and YouTube too. Just search Listener Newsroom. I'm Antoinette Lattouf. Thanks for listening.
Listener.